Well, Marc Miller is Canada's Minister of Indigenous Services. He joins me now. Minister Miller, thanks for your time tonight. I do appreciate it.
Hi, Peter.
Look, let's start there. What's your reaction to the discovery of what appears to be as many as 751 bodies in unmarked graves near this former residential school in Saskatchewan?
Well, Peter, it is devastating that we have been working with Chief Delorme and his community for some weeks now. We did know that this was breaking. It wasn't the place of the federal government, obviously, to get ahead of this. It was really that of the community to speak out. So out of respect for Chief Delorme and the survivors and the members of the community, we were not speaking publicly about it, but we were supporting it. I guess prepared is one word. I don't think anyone can be prepared emotionally for what we are reading over the last days and weeks for these for the communities in Kamloops. It's 3 weeks seems like a day, and that certainly probably will be the case for the people of Cowesses. 751 is an enormous number. It's something that the Truth and Reconciliation report alluded to, but this is something that I think cuts you right at the heart, and hard really to put that into words.
Yeah, and it's, for these communities, it's a grieving process. It's a terrible experience. It's also motivation to press for more action. And the Prime Minister's statement today said this is now Canada's responsibility to bear. What does that mean in practical terms beyond the $27 million, 33 in total, that the government has set aside for these kinds of gravesite searches? Does it mean turning over documents? Does it mean taking the Catholic Church to court if you have to get documents? What does it mean in practical terms?
Well, it means a lot of things, and certainly a number of things that are yet to be identified. There is no community that is prepared for this type of tragedy, and protocols in place that need to be put. First and foremost, we have to allow those communities to take the space they need to do what they need to do to respect their survivors and deal with those that are getting triggered and traumatized, as well as successive generations that are perhaps seeing this for the first time. The federal government, Canada, is in a very difficult position. It is in part responsible for this and needs to account for it. It has indeed accounted for it, but we need to stand back, give the space for those communities to do what they need to do. It isn't a place of Canada to investigate these things. We're essentially asking the perpetrator to investigate. It's not
but there are now some very direct asks here. We heard them again today, which is turn over documents that we still don't have about these grave sites and these burial grounds, and get action from the Catholic Church to turn over their documents.
Well, that's absolutely right, Peter. And there is no one single repository for all these documents. It'll have to be a multi-pronged approach, whether it's looking at our own archival system, whether it's continuing to push the Catholic Church, individual parishes to surrender their documents. This is a truth-gathering information and ultimately an accountability and closure operation, but it is one that we will be there for communities as they need. They need to be able to establish their protocols, and there are different approaches that they are taking, but the Canadian government has said clearly, we know that $27 million will not be enough. There are many communities that want to do a number of other things, whether it's health and mental support, whether it's closing down airspace, whether it's supplying the expertise of the armed forces or assisting them in archival searches. We'll be there for them. I recently spoke to a community in one of the Newfoundland Tribal Council areas that wants to do a demolition of one of the buildings that still remains there. We'll help them with that. But this will be a much longer process. We know that those communities that have been doing it for some time. But there is a longer arc to this that we have to respect, right. And it's one that has to be done with the federal government supporting and not being the front-looking face of this.
Chief Cameron, a conversation earlier in our program, said to me, he described this as genocide and crimes against humanity. Do you agree with that characterization?
Well, Peter, quite clearly, the Prime Minister has said in his response to the final report of murdered missing Indigenous women and girls that he acknowledged the finding, which was genocide, and the residential school system was a clear constituent element of that. So the evidence now is getting much clearer even than what the TRC set forth. Mm-hmm. But we will again continue to recognize this as it is, and as the Prime Minister has recognized, and move on with those communities that are seeing old wounds being reopened, ultimately for for better closure.
Let me ask you about another story that is in the news today involving one of your cabinet colleagues, the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, Carolyn Bennett, publicly apologizing today after sending a text message to former cabinet colleague, Indigenous MP Jody Wilson-Raybould. She's been urging the Prime Minister to stop jockeying for an election, as she puts it, and focus on delivering change for Indigenous rights legislation, transformative change. And Minister Bennett responded in a tweet with one word, pension, ? Implying that Wilson-Raybould doesn't want an election because if it happens before October, she won't qualify for a parliamentary pension. You've probably followed this. Jody Wilson-Raybould called that sexist and racist, reflecting a notion that Indigenous people are lazy and just want money. What do you think about this?
Well, clearly what Dr. Bennett wrote was unacceptable. I think she would be the first to recognize that and is mortified by that. I have immense respect for Dr. Bennett and the former Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Jody Wilson-Raybould. I've had the occasion to work with both, and I have that respect for them. I know there was an interpersonal dynamic between them that was challenging, but it doesn't justify that type of wording, and I think the first to regret that right now so bitterly is Dr. Bennett. I know as well at the same time that Dr. Bennett has put decades and decades of personal and professional work into reconciliation. So I think out of respect for Dr. Bennett, we should allow her to speak for herself to the words that she expressed.
Yeah, as a fellow minister on the Indigenous file, do you think that complicates her ability to do the job?
It doesn't help. It doesn't help. But I think, again, Minister Bennett is someone who has spent, and communities have recognized this, that decades and decades of work into reconciliation at a personal level, and dedicated a good chunk of her professional career. So again, she's mortified by this, regrets it bitterly, and I think out of respect for Dr. Bennett, we should allow her to speak to it herself.
All right, Minister Miller, Marc Miller, thanks for your time again tonight, Minister, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.
Thank you, Peter.